Now let's talk about understanding the implications of activating, deactivating, or freezing a user inside of Salesforce. So let's start talking a little bit about these different actions by actually looking at these different actions. So let's go back to our Salesforce org, and we are in the setup menu of our Salesforce org here. So let's go to the quick find bar again and start typing in user, and then we're going to click on users right here. So click on users, and then let's talk about activating, deactivating, and freezing a user. So let's go ahead and actually click on a user in order to start talking about it. So I'm going to click on the user that I created, and let's start talking about activating, deactivating, and freezing a user. First, let's talk about where those buttons are in order to activate, deactivate, and freeze. So if you want to freeze a user, that button is going to be right here. So if you want to freeze that user before you deactivate that user so that that person cannot log back into Salesforce or do anything inside of Salesforce, you'll want to freeze that user. The reason you may need to freeze a user is because that user owns different records inside of Salesforce, or they own reports, or they're an approver for something, or they're on a workflow rule, and you don't want to just delete that user. Matter of fact, you can't just delete that user. You have to assign those workflow rules, those reports, those records to somebody else before you deactivate that user. So you may want to freeze that user before you deactivate them. So you're going to have to click this freeze button. So that's how you freeze a user. They're pretty much deactivated when you freeze them, but they're not completely deactivated. So in order to completely deactivate somebody, let's say they get fired or they quit, then you'll want to deactivate that person. But like I said, in the meantime, you'll freeze that person before you deactivate them. In order to deactivate a user, you see this active checkbox here. We're going to have to click edit in order to deactivate that user. So let's go ahead and click edit. And then we see the active button right here, and it's checked. So in order to deactivate this user, we're going to have to uncheck that checkbox. So I'm going to click uncheck, and when you click that checkbox, you get this message here. Deactivating users removes them from all delegated groups and sharing privileges. The following page prompts you to remove this user from any teams. You can still transfer this user's records to an active user and view the user's name under Manage Users. So you'll click OK if you want to deactivate them. And now they are deactivated as soon as you click Save. Now I don't want to deactivate this user, so I can just go ahead and click Cancel. And that's what you can do if you make any sort of mistakes or anything like that inside of the user record. Let's say you didn't mean to click this checkbox or any of these other checkboxes, or you didn't remember what you changed inside of here. You can just go ahead and click cancel. And if you click cancel, then everything goes back to normal inside of your user's record. If you were to click save, then everything would save the way you changed it. So whenever you created a user, you activated that user. When you come in and you click edit and you click that checkbox next to active, you deactivate that user. And when you click freeze, you freeze a user. So I talked a little bit about what it means to deactivate a user. So the implications of deactivating a user is that you have to remove them from any records that they own, as well as any reports and dashboards, workflow rules, or anything else that they own inside of Salesforce. And you have to give that access to somebody else in your Salesforce org. So like I said, that may be somebody who's been there for a long time, and you're going to have to freeze that user before you do all of that other work on the back end and deactivate that user. So those are the implications of activating, deactivating, and freezing a user inside of Salesforce. Now let's move on and go to security and access, which is 13% of your Salesforce exam.